So you want to own a scrapyard. You picture it easy. Buy a lot on the edge of town, put up a fence, hang a sign, wait. People show up with dead cars and busted appliances. You pay them a little, you sell it by the ton, and the difference is yours. Nobody asks you for a business plan. Nobody needs you to be charming. You need a scale and a gate. That's the dream. The problem is what happens between the truck scale and the bank, because the metal is not the business. The gate is. And the price you sell at gets set on the other side of the world, by people who have never heard of you. So what does it actually cost to open that gate? What does the machinery cost to feed? Why does one bad quarter in a commodity market wipe out yards that ran fine for 30 years? And why do the smartest owners in this trade barely touch the metal at all? Start with the ticket price, because it spreads wider than almost any asset you will ever look at. At the bottom end, you are not buying a yard at all. You are buying a truck, a trailer, and a phone, a mobile scrap operation. Collecting appliances and job site metal and hauling it to somebody else's gate starts between $50,000 and $150,000. No land, no permits worth mentioning. You are a supplier, not a yard. Then comes the real thing. Go look at what actual salvage yards trade for right now, and the numbers fan out. A small wrecking yard with inventory in Rancho Cordova, California, listed at $350,000. A yard in Colorado, land and building and inventory included, at $3.3 million. A 16-year-old turnkey yard in Hillsdale County, Michigan, with rail access, at $5 million. A large scrap dealer in New York, real estate included, at $7.9 million. Same words on the sign, 20 times the price. Here's what actually separates them. 3 things, and not one of them is the pile of metal you can see from the road. Number 1, the land. Zoning a new scrapyard is close to impossible in most towns today. Nobody wants one built next to them. So an existing yard with a legal, grandfathered use is holding something a new buyer cannot recreate at any price. That permission is often worth more than everything sitting on top of it. Number 2, the rail spur. Metal is heavy and cheap per pound. Move it by truck, and freight eats your margin alive. A yard on a rail siding ships to mills 2 states away and still makes money. A yard without one sells to whoever is nearest, at whatever they feel like paying. Number 3, the scale and the license. A certified truck scale, a state scrap dealer license, and a clean compliance record are the entry ticket. Without them, you are not a yard. You are a lot with junk on it. And that's the first thing nobody tells you. You are rarely buying a business. You are buying permission to operate one. Sign the papers and a second set of obligations shows up that was never on the listing. Start with the ground. Scrapyards are where cars come to be taken apart, and cars are full of things you would never pour on soil on purpose. Lead from batteries, oil, coolant, transmission fluid, transformer oil. If the yard ever touched electrical gear, all of it soaks down, quietly, for decades. Look at what that becomes. 9 miles west of Allentown, Pennsylvania, sits a 20-acre parcel called the Hebelka Auto Salvage Yard. From 1958 to 1979, it was an ordinary junkyard. Cars, storage tanks, tires, drums, scrap. Somewhere in those years, the yard accumulated about 1,000 cubic yards of used battery casings, most of them cracked open and empty, stacked in 2 piles. The yard stopped operating in 1979. In 1985, an EPA inspection found lead running downhill from those piles into the soil. In 1987, the site went onto the National Priorities List, Federal Superfund. Battery casings hauled off, contaminated soil dug up and trucked to a permitted landfill, and the site did not come off that list until 1999. Read that timeline again? The business closed in '79. The liability was still being cleaned up 20 years later. That is not a rare case. Akron, Ohio, has a 7.5-acre version, where a salvage yard took in transformers full of PCB oil, burned some of it as furnace fuel, and left PCBs in the groundwater underneath. So every serious scrap acquisition starts with a Phase 2 environmental assessment, and buyers walk away from good yards over a single soil boring. You are not buying dirt. You are buying whatever is already in it. Then there's the paperwork you inherit. A scrapyard in America is a records office for law enforcement that happens to also buy metal, and the rules are not gentle. Arizona state law requires you to log the seller's name, physical address, date of birth, signature, and a physical description including gender, height, weight, race, and eye and hair color, plus a photocopy of a government-issued ID. In Missouri, you cannot hand over $500 or more in cash. It goes out as a numbered check, or through a system that photographs the person taking the money. California restricts cash outright on most non-ferrous buys. New York bans cash for detached catalytic converters entirely and makes you hold the records for 2 years. In Virginia, buying a detached converter outside the compliance rules is a Class 6 felony. None of that is optional. And every one of those rules exists because somebody, somewhere, tried to turn a stolen thing into money at a gate exactly like yours. Now the good part, where the money comes in. A working yard runs 4 income streams, and they are wildly different sizes from what most people assume. Number 1. Ferrous, iron and steel. This is the volume business, the mountain you can see from the road, and it prices by the ton. Here's how that math runs. Somebody backs a pickup to your scale with an old washing machine and a load of fence posts, and you pay them shredded and light iron rates. Across 2026, that has run around $150 to $260 a ton at the gate. Then you accumulate, you process, you grade it, and you sell to a mill or a shredder operator. What do the mills pay? The ARMDAS index, built from verified mill purchase data, had prompt industrial grades trading between $465 and $471 a ton nationally, from late January to late June of 2026. Benchmark scrap steel sat around $380 a ton in mid-July. That gap is your business. Buy at gate prices, sell at mill prices, and the middle pays for everything else in this video. Number 2. Non-ferrous. Copper, aluminum, brass. Small volume, enormous value per pound. Copper has been running about $2.50 to $4 a pound. Aluminum, 30 to 70 cents. Brass somewhere between $1.20 and $2.20. Now notice the unit. Steel prices by the ton, copper prices by the pound. 2,000 pounds of steel might bring you $200. 2,000 pounds of clean copper wire brings you $5,000 or better. Non-ferrous is a small fraction of what crosses your scale and a very large fraction of what lands in your account, which is exactly why copper is the most stolen metal in the country and why every regulation in the last section exists. Number 3, and this is the one that surprises people. Catalytic converters. A converter is a steel can with a ceramic honeycomb inside, and that honeycomb carries a coating of platinum, palladium, and rhodium. A standard factory unit scraps today for roughly $100 to $250. A high-grade foreign or hybrid unit can run $600 to $1,400. Prius converters sit in the $300 to $700 range. Stop and hold that against the car it came out of. A whole sedan, shredded, might give you a few $100s of steel. One part bolted underneath it can be worth more than all the rest of the metal combined. That's not a rounding error. That's the profit center wearing a heat shield. Number 4. Parts. Run a dismantling operation instead of just a crusher, and you sell the same car twice. A used original equipment converter that scraps for $200 sells as a working replacement part for $150 to $400, against $1,000 to $3,000 for a new one. Alternators, doors, wheels, engines, all of it moves at parts prices, not metal prices. There's a fifth line too, quieter than the rest. Services, roll-off container rental, demolition clearance, disposal fees on the items that cost you money to accept. You get paid to take the thing in, then paid again when what's inside it goes back out. That's the whole shape of it. Paid at the gate coming in, paid at the mill going out. Now here's the number that reframes the entire business. Look at those two prices again. The public sells scrap steel across your scale at roughly $150 to $260 a ton. Mills buy graded, processed scrap at roughly $380 to $470 a ton. You are not being paid to own metal. You are being paid to move it from one price to another price. Listen to that again, because it's the most important sentence in this video. You are not being paid to own metal. You are being paid to move it from one price to another price. Every machine coming up in the next 5 minutes, every permit, every hourly wage, exists for one reason: to close the distance between those two numbers faster than the market can move them. So what does closing that distance cost? Start with the machine everybody dreams about, the shredder. A junkyard shredder starts around $1.5 million for a smaller unit and climbs past $12 million for a full-scale hammer mill installation with all the separation equipment behind it. And here's the line that should stop you cold. Industry guidance puts that sticker price at roughly 30 to 40% of the true 10-year cost of owning the thing. Read that again. The purchase price is a third of what the shredder costs you. Where does the rest go? Electricity, first, and it is usually the largest single operating expense in the whole yard. A modern super heavy-duty shredder turns on a 4,000 horsepower motor. The big ones reach 9 and 10,000 horsepower. You are running a small power station that eats cars. Where parts, second, hammers inside a shredder are consumable. They pound steel all day, they wear down, they get replaced, forever. So do the grates and the liners. Fire, third, and this one is getting worse every year. Lithium-ion batteries out of electric and hybrid vehicles are entering the scrap stream in volume, and they do not enjoy being hit by a hammer at speed. A single rotor fire can do $500,000 or more in damage and take the machine down for weeks with no throughput, and the payments do not pause. Now step away from the shredder and look at the rest of the stack, because most yards never own one. A certified truck scale runs $20,000 to $100,000, and it is not optional. Everything you buy and everything you sell crosses it. A baler, which crushes loose metal into dense blocks that ship efficiently, runs $50,000 to $200,000. Then material handlers, forklifts, shears, magnets, and fuel for all of it. Then the invisible costs. Stormwater compliance. Rain falls on a yard full of metal, picks up whatever is on the ground, and runs off your property. Every serious yard runs under an industrial stormwater permit, with sampling, testing, containment, and reporting. Insurance. Expensive because your business runs heavy machines, cutting torches, hazardous fluids, and members of the public wandering through the middle of it. And freight. Always freight. Scrap is heavy and cheap per pound, which is the worst combination in logistics. Every mile between your gate and the mill comes out of the middle. Add it up and the picture changes shape. A scrapyard is not a place where metal is stored. It is a processing plant on thin margins per ton that has to run volume to survive. And here's where most first-time owners get caught. You buy metal today at today's price. You process it, you accumulate it, until you have a full load worth shipping, and you sell it in 2 weeks, or 4, or 6. Whatever the market is paying by then. You are long inventory, every single day. From the moment you hand cash across the counter, you own a position in a global commodity market. You did not choose to be a trader. There is no way to run this business without being one. So who sets that price? Not you. Turkey is the largest single buyer of American recycled steel, and when a Turkish mill negotiates $5 a ton less on a bulk cargo, that number ripples back into what your local mill pays you next week. Chinese demand, the dollar, energy prices, construction activity, all of it lands on your scale, and none of it answers your calls. So the trap looks like this. Your buying price adjusts slowly, because the public expects roughly what they got last month, and gets annoyed when you cut. Your selling price adjusts instantly, because mills reprice constantly. When the market rises, you look like a genius. Metal you bought at last month's price sells into this month's higher price, and the spread widens for free. When the market falls, that same mechanism runs backwards and eats you alive. You are holding a yard full of metal you paid too much for, against a mill price that already dropped. Here it is in one sentence. In this business, your inventory is not an asset, it is an open position. To understand why the modern yard even exists, you have to meet the man who made it possible. And he did not come from money. Alton Scott Newell was born in 1913 in Oklahoma, into a migrant working family. He left school in the 10th grade to help support them, worked whatever jobs there were, and eventually found himself managing a scrapyard. His job was taking cars apart by hand. An axe, a chisel, 10 hours of work to reduce one automobile to sellable scrap. One man, one car, one full working day, and then some. In 1938, he moved to Texas and bought a small yard of his own. First thing he did was build himself a portable baler out of material he scavenged from his own scrap pile. Not bought, built, from junk. By the late 1950s, he was running scrap plants across Texas and Arizona, chewing on a problem. Copper mines needed shredded tin cans for a chemical process. He remembered a grain crusher he had watched as a boy in Kansas that ground grain and blew it up into a storage silo, and built a shredding machine for cans. It worked. Then he noticed something. Material coming out the other end was clean enough that steel mills wanted it. Dense, consistent pieces, easy to melt. So he asked the obvious question, what if the machine were big enough to swallow a whole car? The system he had working by 1965 was clever in ways that mattered commercially, not just mechanically. A controlled feed device, so the machine ate steadily instead of choking. A reject door, so an unshreddable piece got thrown out, instead of destroying the rotor. A top discharge design, so you did not need a massive foundation. And a 500 horsepower motor, when earlier attempts had needed 6,000. Smaller, cheaper, affordable to somebody who was not already a giant. His patent came through in 1969. The machine processed a car in about 10 minutes and ran 30 to 40 cars a day, 10 hours by hand, 10 minutes by machine. Newell died in Houston in March of 2000, at 86 years old. Designs descended from his work power more than half the shredder installations on Earth, and a modern 4,000 horsepower super heavy-duty shredder now averages around 120 tons an hour. Every scrapyard you have ever driven past exists downstream of a 10th grade dropout with an axe who got tired of 10-hour cars. Now the failure. Not a rookie who mispriced a load. A public company running 3 automobile shredders across 6 states. Metalico Incorporated, out of Cranford, New Jersey. Ferrous and non-ferrous recycling plus precious metals recovery, spread through New York, Pennsylvania, Ohio, West Virginia, New Jersey, and Mississippi. Real infrastructure, real scale. Then ferrous prices dropped. Look at what one quarter did. For the quarter ending March 31, 2015, Metalico reported sales of $75.9 million. The same quarter a year earlier had been $118.5 million. Sales fell 36%. Net loss for the quarter, $10.9 million. A year earlier, that loss had been $3.9 million. EBITDA went from positive $3.1 million to negative $5.3 million. And the company's own explanation, in its own filing, is the trap from 4 minutes ago stated plainly. Results were hit by a drastic drop in ferrous prices which impacted inventory valuations and, in the company's words, virtually eliminated margin on ferrous sales for the quarter. Not reduced, eliminated. That's what being long inventory into a falling market looks like on paper, not a slow bleed. One quarter. Here's how it ended. In February of 2015, Adam Weitzman of Upstate Shredding, the largest privately owned scrap processor on the East Coast, went public with an offer of 78 cents a share, holding about 11.7% already, and wrote that he did not believe Metalico should stay independent. In June, the board sold to a different buyer, Total Merchant Limited, for total consideration of around $105 million. Shareholders got 60 cents a share. Now split that number. About $44 million of it went to the equity. Roughly $45 million went to retiring the company's senior and convertible debt, and about $16 million more of debt was assumed on top. Read those two figures next to each other. The lenders got more than the owners. On the 11th of September, 2015, the deal closed and Metalico was delisted. 3 shredders, 6 states, and the equity in all of it came out worth less than the debt against it, because a commodity price moved. So how do the ones who last actually do it? Watch what they do differently, because it is remarkably consistent. First, they turn inventory fast, and they do not speculate. Ask an amateur what he does when the price drops and he says he holds and waits for it to come back. Ask an operator who has been through 2 cycles and he says he ships, and he cuts his buying price the same morning. Holding metal for a better price is a bet, financed with your own working capital, in a market where you have no information advantage at all. Yards that die are usually the ones that kept paying yesterday's prices to keep people happy, while the mill price fell out from under them. Second, they get very good at separation. Anybody can sell a mixed pile. Money lives in sorting. Clean copper pays far more than dirty copper. Graded steel pays more than mixed steel. Pulling the non-ferrous fraction back out of shredded material, the stuff the trade calls Zorba, is where a lot of yards actually earn their profit. Equipment and labor that does that separation is not overhead, it is the product line. Third, they build the flow instead of waiting for it. The public backing pickups up to your scale is nice and unpredictable. Yards that survive lock in commercial supply. Plant offcuts, demolition contractors, roll-off containers parked at fabrication shops on a standing schedule. That material arrives on a rhythm, in known grades, and does not depend on whether it rained on Saturday. And fourth, quietly, the good ones own their land. Property zoned and grandfathered for heavy scrap use, near rail or water, in a country that will not permit new ones, appreciates while the operating business rides the commodity cycle up and down. Plenty of yards have made more money on the dirt than they ever made on the metal. So does this actually work? Run both years. Good year. Metal prices firm or rising. Construction is busy, so demolition scrap flows. Your gate is busy. Your inventory turns in 10 days. And every load you bought last month sells into a slightly better market this month. Copper is over $3 a pound. Converters are moving. The parts counter covers payroll on its own. In that year, a mid-sized yard is a strong business. Cash generative, hard to compete with because nobody can permit a new one nearby. Sitting on real estate that keeps appreciating underneath it. This is why families hold these things for 3 generations. Now the bad year. Ferrous drops $100 a ton over 1 quarter. You are holding a yard full of material, bought at the old price. The mill reprices immediately. The public gets angry when you cut, so volume falls at exactly the moment you need volume most. Fixed costs do not move. Insurance, stormwater compliance, payroll, the equipment note, all identical to last quarter. Own a shredder, and it gets worse. A shredder is a fixed-cost machine that only makes sense at high throughput. Run it half full and every ton carries double the overhead. That is the year that ended Metalico's independence, with 3 shredders and 6 states behind it. So, the honest verdict. A scrapyard is one of the last businesses where a person with no degree, no investors, and a strong back can build real wealth. That part is true, and it still happens every year. But understand what you actually bought. Not a metal business, a spread business, run on borrowed working capital, priced by mills you will never meet, on ground that can turn into a federal liability decades after you sell it. People who win at this are not the ones who love metal, they're the ones who respect the price. Here's what nobody tells you when you drive past a scrapyard, see a mountain of steel, and think, that's money sitting there. It isn't. That pile is a position, bought at one price, waiting on another, in a market that does not know your name and will not wait for you. You are not buying a yard full of metal. You are buying a bet on a price, with a fence around it.